George, ask where they're going to send the link to.
Okay, Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Yep.
Could I inquire as to where they're sending Carolyn a new link to join onto?
So we just sent the invite to Councillor Parrish with the correct meeting link. She should be receiving it.
To her email or to where?
By email.
Email.
Thanks.
At Councillor at the meeting.
Okay. Do you want to start with your opening remarks first, Madam Clerk?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to provide a shortened protocol for electronic participation in this meeting. Recorded votes are not allowed at committee meetings. The committee chair or I will call for any objections. If you have an objection, please indicate your name and objection. If no objections are stated, the motion will be deemed to be approved. If you are participating electronically or leaving the meeting, please send an email to council@peelregion.ca to confirm that you are leaving the meeting. If you leave the meeting for any votes thereafter, you'll be marked as absent. For committee members and staff only, please email council@peelregion.ca or select the raise hand option on WebEx if you would like to speak, and this is only for council and staff. We shall now commence the meeting with a roll call. Please indicate your presence by responding here when called upon. Councillor Carlson?
Here.
He's here.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini? I don't see him yet. Councillor Fortini?
I'm
He's not
here,
in at-
present.
Oh, thank you. Chair Anika?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Innes? Councillor Innes? I see Councillor Innes, but she needs to acknowledge. Councillor Innes? I'll go back to her. Councillor Kiernan?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Starr?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson? Mayor Thompson?
Present.
Thank
Present.
you. Councillor Vicente?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Innes? I can see Councillor Innes, so I'll note her as present. Other councillors present who are not members of the committee are Councillor Sinclair and Dasco, and I'll note them in the minutes. Thank you. I now pass it
Councillor
over.
Innes said she can't hear anything on her thing, so
Oh, okay. We'll reach out to her shortly. So
Thank
I'll
you.
pass it on to Councillor Parrish. Thank you.
Okay, I assume we've called the meeting to order. Are
Correct.
there any conflicts of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the agenda?
Are there any objections?
None? We're fine?
Yep.
We start with delegations. 4.1, Sylvia Roberts, resident, City of Brampton, regarding Orangeville Brampton Railway. Welcome, Sylvia.
Okay, we're just waiting for her to join.
Should we go on to 4.2?
Sylvia Roberts is now available.
Okay.
Sylvia,
Welcome,
please
Sylvia.
proceed.
Good morning. My name is Sylvia Roberts. Next slide. Okay, so what and where is OBRI? So the Orangeville Brampton Railway is a short line railway running from Streetsville to Orangeville, as I'm sure the Caledon councillors are aware. I'm not sure many Mississauga councillors are aware of that. It has three important points. If you look at the south, we have the connection at Streetsville. Moving further north, we have where it used to connect to the CN line just west of downtown Brampton. And further north, we have the Brampton Caledon Airport by the Brampton Flying Club. Next slide. So the reason I'm bringing it forward is the town of Orangeville owns this, and it is currently looking to divest it. And from what I'm hearing, the mayor of Orangeville wishes to sell this parcel in particular, which will sever and completely destroy the potential of this short line railway for any meaningful uses. The reason for this is they are paying, or at least the reason given is they're paying approximately $450,000 a year in property tax to the municipalities in the region of Peel. And so some people there wish to make a quick buck. Next slide.
Could I interrupt you just for a moment?
Sure.
Is anybody seeing the slides? Not, Alan, are
Okay,
you
I
seeing
can
them?
see it through WebEx.
If
Yes,
the
you see, yeah, if you go to the layout and press the big screen, it'll come up, Madam Chair.
So for the
Try
committee
that.
members and staff, if you can select either stage view or focus view from the layout, then you can see the presentation at a bigger.
Okay.
Can we go back to slide 2 because there's a diagram on slide 2. Previous slide. All right, here. So if you will notice, there are 3 circled spots. The south one is the connection in approximately Streetsville to CP's main line. Then there's the connection with, or where there used to be a connection with CN, just west of downtown Brampton, and further north is the Brampton Caledon Airport. The railway runs right next to Brampton Caledon Airport. Can councillors see this image?
Please continue, Sylvia. Thank you.
Okay. Can I go to the 4th slide then? The next one. There we go. So here is the region of Peel's plan for expansion of land in Caledon. If you will notice carefully, so the black chunk is the Brampton Caledon Airport, and around it is planned industrial land. The value of industrial land is actually significantly more if there is railway access right there, because rail is dramatically more efficient for moving bulkier goods and large quantities of goods. So there is value for the industrial and manufacturing sector in the region of Peel. If this is maintained, if this is severed, then it's just an obstacle for economic development in the region of Peel. Next slide. So for the councillors who can see, this is an image of Ottawa's O train. What they did was they took a railway, that rail line that still existed and was still functional, and they bought a couple of DMUs, diesel multiple units, which are effectively, instead of a big locomotive like you see on a GO train, each of the cars has its power, and they were able to buy them used. And for a fraction of a cost of a LRT, they were able to set up a new line. For their cost was about $4 million per kilometer. In comparison, the cost of setting up an LRT in the GTA is currently estimated at approximately $120 million. This is per kilometer. So it's a case of, if the region of Peel were to waive the property taxes on this rail line for literally 100 years, this is still less than the cost of 1 kilometer of LRT. I've heard a number of Caledon councillors talk about a desire for rail. This rail line is the best chance you have. It's quite economical to keep it operational because it is still functional. Once the right-of-way is severed, that's it. It's destroyed permanently. So there is economic value for the region of Peel to, for example, have a railway connecting Streetsville through to downtown Brampton, connect to the Brampton Caledon Airport. The Greater Toronto area has effectively 3 airports that are small, that aren't Pearson or the Billy Bishop Airport. There is the Brampton Caledon Airport. There is the Burlington Airport. There is the Buttonville Airport in Markham, which is continuously teetering on the edge of closure. And if that closes, there's going to be significant demand for other airfields in the GTA, such as the Brampton Caledon Airport. And then there's one in Markham. Of those, the only one that has long-term plans to continue operating and is near a 400 series highway is the Brampton Caledon Airport. That's because of the 410. And if the 413 happens, it may or may not happen, that would further improve its value for industrial uses and other uses. It's with the business park at Meadowvale, there's potential value for a train to operate there, because if you are Mississauga and looking to attract Fortune 500 companies, they may find it convenient to have access to a place to store business jets. There's other potential value in Caledon. For example, I believe Osprey has talked about expanding and opening hotels and that kind of stuff. This railway actually runs through the site, so potentially if Caledon wishes to have major tournaments there, you'd have a railway that's operational to the site. So this is the benefits of it, because this is the plan. So why is this at the planning meeting? The provincial growth plan at 3.2.5 specifically talks about for existing or planned corridors for transportation, increased opportunities for moving people and goods by rail, and preservation of it. The provincial policy statement says planning for land uses in the vicinity of airports, rail facilities. The definition includes railways, such as the actual rail line, shall be undertaken so that their long-term operation economic role is protected, and airports, rail facilities, and marine facilities and sensitive uses are appropriately designated, buffered, and or protected from each other in accordance with policy 1.2.6. So I'm looking for at minimum is in the new official plan to clearly mark the desire for the region of Peel to preserve this railway and tell Orangeville it does not want the railway lands at Park Street to be sold, severing the railway line, and consider the acquisition of it, whether outright or an option to purchase it. Thank you. That's my delegation. I cannot hear Councillor Parrish, who's showing us George Carlson.
Yeah, use my.
Yes, I'm sorry. I have to use his. My machine's not working. He's in one room and I'm in the other. I'm going to accept a question from Chair Unica, but I would like to caution everybody that this issue was an in-camera discussion in April and it's ongoing. Ergo, we can make no comments other than just receive the report, but you can ask questions. Chair Unica?
Councillor Parrish, thank you very much. That was one of the points that I wanted to make to Sylvia, that this is very much under consideration by council. However, I just thought, and Sylvia, thank you for being here. If you don't mind my asking the question this way with sincerity, what is your interest in this? Why would you like to see this unfold this way?
I'm a resident of Brampton. My family moved to Brampton in 1974, and it's a case of new railway lines are incredibly expensive and almost impossible to build. I think the last major railway that wasn't like an LRT or something in the entire country was built approximately 30 years ago. Actually, no, that was the 80s, so it's more like 40 years ago. So once these are destroyed, there is no going back. And with the region of Peel talking about adding, what is it, another 700,000 people, the potential value of this is significantly increased. And so it's a case of you may or may not want this in the short term, but once this is destroyed, it's permanently destroyed.
Okay, so Sylvia, maybe, and the chair can help me out and she'll rap me on the knuckles at the inappropriate time, because I want to be genuine and sincere on all of us. You've raised some very valid points, and I think this is a public matter because the Brampton Board of Trade approached us as well, and that was publicly with regards to the viability, the economic viability of a corridor for goods, which is what originally started at. George probably knows it well, Councillor Carlson. Ontario was filled with these spur rail lines that got product, usually farm products, to market, in this case, grains to reed milling. That's why it's such an unusual line as to where it starts and where it ends in Streetsville. It's been determined by others, not us, that that use simply isn't economically viable. If it were, I would think Orangeville would carry on. This is the first that I've heard that it's taxes that are the problem. That hasn't come up. And all I will say, Madam Chair, is we certainly are looking at the corridor as the region of Peel. I'm not sure it's because of its ability to transport product. I don't know that it'll ever continue to have any viable use as a commuter link as well, but it is a very valuable corridor, and Councillor is seized of the matter, and we're looking at it with a lot of moving parts. So, Madam Chair, I will leave it at that. Thank Sylvia for their interest, because it's appreciated, but we certainly are looking at it, but there's a lot of moving parts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The town of Orangeville specifically said its property for approximately $450,000 in property taxes to the municipalities in the region of Peel that are the reason they want to sell it. It's a lot for a municipality of their size to pay, but relative to the region of Peel's budget, it's not much, especially when compared to the cost of building a new rail line of some sort.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. I see no other questions. Chair Unica, could you move receipt of the delegation, please? Anybody opposed to that? And thank you very much for your attention to this, Sylvia. You demonstrate a real interest in it, and I appreciate that very much, as does the rest of council. Thank you for your delegation today. Our second delegation is from Paul Lowe's, Principal, SGL Planning and Design, Inc., on behalf of the Humber Station Villages Landowners Group. It's regarding Regional Official Plan Amendment 30, Option 6, lands related to 5.6 and 6.3. Welcome, Paul.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of council. So I'm here before you this morning, as the chair noted. We represent the Humber Villages Landowners Group, who own lands in the Option 6 lands of ROPA 30. And I'm here regarding item 5.6 on ROPA 30, just to give you an update. As you know, the Option 6 lands are located in the Bolton Rural Service Center, generally south of Healy Road, east of Humber Station Road, and north of Mayfield Road on the western side of Bolton. As you also know, I'm sure, that ROPA 30 was approved orally by the LPAT on November 30th, 2020. And we'd wish to thank Regional Council for your support of the Option 6 lands throughout the ROPA 30 process. We are currently advancing the delivery of those lands. We're currently collaborating with the town of Caledon staff in the preparation of a secondary plan for the Option 6 lands, as well as we're completing a number of background technical studies in support of that secondary plan. We also note that very recently the province, and I'm sure you're absolutely aware, and it's in your staff report, that the province recently approved an MZO for the Option 3 lands, which are part of ROPA 30. However, none of the Option 6 lands were included in an MZO, despite Regional Council's resolution on November 12, 2020, requesting an MZO for the Option 6 lands. So we'd like to ask for a couple of requests of Regional Council. First of all, if you could request your staff to follow up with the province on your MZO request and determine if the province is in favor of an MZO for Option 6. Secondly, we'd also ask the region to request the town of Caledon to also submit an MZO request for the Option 6 lands, so that the region and council are going hand in hand to the province. The Option 6 lands are positioned well to be serviced more expeditiously than other lands in ROPA 30, and can extend the servicing further north to allow the other options to also be serviced. So the MZO for Option 6 lands will advance the delivery of all of ROPA 30 lands for earlier development. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning and to update you on our efforts to advance the development of the ROPA 30 lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Mayor Thompson?
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, for your delegation. And I know you're working closely with the town, and thank you for that. The one thing I want to clarify was the MZO for the rail lands was basically, we've had 3 sites. We've lost the other 2 for development applications, even with the long-term control bylaw is not effective. So that's why we asked the province to protect the rail lands, not to interfere with the planning or that's why we're being extremely careful, because when we asked for that, it was still at the board trying to get resolved. But really, that's what the purpose of that MZO was. It was no intention to stick a finger in anyone's eye. What we were trying to do is, because we had an application come forward by a former planner that was successful before. So this is why we needed to move quickly to get those lands secured for the future. So that was mainly what our big focus was at that point in time. I just want to clarify, because we got a lot of people from a lot of municipalities sitting here, but thank you for bringing that question forward. And I'm looking forward to have further discussion in the agenda. Thank you.
Would this be an opportune moment to bring 5.6 forward, or do you want to just leave the order of the agenda as is? Any comments?
If the committee desires, we can move forward the report from staff, item 5.6.
Any objections to doing that? I might also suggest to Paul Lowe's that the follow-up from the region, it may be a waste of time on this, because we've been told by the province that they are only accepting, or pretty much accepting, MZO requests from local municipalities only. They're not accepting them from the upper tier municipalities. So it's been sitting there. I know our mayor has followed up once or twice to find out the status of it, and was told that it's up to the local municipalities, the lower tier ones, to make these requests, and those are the ones they're granting right now. So your request would be to the town of Caledon to put in an MZO on option 6, if that's the direction you want to go in. So you'd have to go to their council, do a delegation, and see if they'll put that in for you. And you're welcome to stay for the discussion on 5.6. Is Adrian here to walk us through it?
Councillor Parrish, we just need a motion of receipt for Paul Lowe's delegation.
Yes, sorry. Yes, Councillor or Mayor Thompson, would you move receipt? No objections? All in favor? Fine. And now we're moving 5.6 forward, and we'll have Adrian walk us through it and ask any questions you have there. And Paul is welcome to stay and listen to the discussion.
So through you, Madam Chair, hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yep.
Great. So the report at item 5.6 is an information report, and it's prepared in response to, I guess, a request from the committee at the last meeting for an update on ROPA 30 and the next steps. And the report basically outlines being adopted.
Oh, Adrian, you're going in and out. If everybody would mute, maybe we'll be able to hear Adrian better. But he's frozen on my screen.
It's all good on my side here.
And keep going. I can hear you now.
Okay, great. So yeah, the ROPA 30 was adopted by council back in 2016, and as we know, it was appealed to the LPAT. There was a long process leading up to settlement discussions, and ultimately a settlement was approved, and ROPA 30 was approved on November 30th, 2020 by the LPAT, and that decision by the LPAT did bring forward lands into the settlement boundary for Bolton. So it brought forward the option 6 lands and the triangle lands as approved by council. As well, through the settlement, there was able to be a closer look at takeouts from those lands in terms of environmental constraints, the quarter protection lands in southern part of Caledon, and some further sort of analysis on allocation of the 2031 growth for Peel. And as a result, there was an additional 90 hectares of community lands that were identified and supported by the board to accommodate 2031 growth, and additional lands in addition to what council had brought brought in their approval lands in option 1 up by the Bolton Goal, which we've just been discussing. One of the rounding out area B, and a portion of the option 1 lands were brought in. So that's now in place and approved through that oral decision. We're still waiting for a written decision from the LPAT, and that will follow. I'm advised at some point in some months, but nevertheless, the oral decision is formal and in effect, and those lands are now in the regional official plan. In terms of next steps, so the next steps now, in accordance with typical, the local planning process would unfold, including secondary plans, any neighborhood community plans, subdivision plans, all of that, and the relevant engineering and approvals and everything to go along with that. One of the questions that has been out there is about the effect of the provincially significant employment zones. Employment zone that does cover the option 6 and triangle lands, and we deal with that in the report and talk about the fact that the LPAT decision was based on the 2006 growth plan, and the provincially significant employment zone sort of didn't play into the decision, would play into the future. Nevertheless, the provincially significant employment zone applied by the province does allow for mixed use development. The expectation is that in implementing ROPA 30, we must plan for all of the population and employment that's allocated through that. And so, a significant portion of the option 6 lands would be required to accommodate community lands, mix of employment and population to comply with ROPA 30. So we expect that to unfold through the local planning process. And we also do touch in the report on the minister's zoning order, which was approved a week or so ago on the option 3 lands, and point out that that does send a very strong signal in terms of provincial support for the land uses in the area related to the future GO station and the transit station, transit supportive land uses around that, and applies permissions for those land uses. Nevertheless, as a practical matter, in order to implement development in the area, the local planning process, the secondary planning to detail out the distribution and elements of those land uses, to create the lots, to create the local road network, to do the engineering approvals and servicing and all of that, must unfold. And I understand that process is going to be getting underway in the coming months with the landowners and the city. I guess the other thing I would point out is there was in ROPA 30, as adopted by council and I guess strengthened a little bit by the LPAT decision, there are a number of specific policies that were applied that must be implemented through the local planning process. Things like heightened attention to affordable housing and healthy development, and also a very specific policy requiring that the secondary plan process address the phasing and staging of development and the financing and how that's all going to work, because some of the areas brought in are more complicated than others. Anyway, I think that summarizes the report, which is on the agenda for information to follow up on the request for that and get on the public record the LPAT approval of ROPA 30.
Thank you very much, Adrian. My first question is from from Mayor Alan Thompson.
I'm nowhere near a doctor. Thank you for the report, and I can see the reason when on your map you've left the multimodal corridor off. I just assume because that's from council decision by the region last week. My question is, talking about going forward with an MZO, I think at this point in time, we just need to put a brake on everything, because as Caledon, we need to figure this out. The region's gone against a multimodal corridor here. If the province decides to walk away from it, this is going to change our planning significantly. We need to figure out how we're going to be able to manage traffic. what his expectation is on regional roads to handle that traffic, and how much growth that intensification that Mississauga and Brampton are going to have to take, because we're not going to be able to do that. So we're going to have to take a pause and really think through how we've agreed to the LPAT decision. We're waiting for the outcome on the LPAT decision. We got to figure out how we're going to work all that through. Without a corridor in place, we have to look at that, because with the region not no longer working on that, we'll definitely set a tone for where the province is at, and we're going to have to figure out where the province is at. And so this means that we're going to have to look at phasing and a lot of things in our official plan of how we go forward now. This is changing so many things, especially we have yet to get a commitment from Metrolinx on the timing for the GO system, even though the lands are protected now, to where that's going to land up. I know Vaughan is pushing extremely hard to get the GO stops in their area as well. But I think at this point, I think it's premature to be asking for any more MZOs, because we're creating expectations. I need Mr. Lowe's, I need everybody to work with us to figure out how we're going to accommodate the growth and how much we can actually do. I think we have to go back to the drawing board and really, really think on how things are going to look. To take 300,000 people, that's just not possible. And there's no way in hell that I'm going to allow a future corridor, if this is lost, then gets put through the Greenbelt and the Oak Ridges Moraine, will be devastating to the north part of Caledon. And I just won't allow that to happen. So I think what we need to do is we need to work with everybody through the official plan on what this is going to look like. And no doubt, there's going to be a whole different look on how we need to do things. And I know we're going to have lively meetings going forward. So, Adrian, I guess my question back to you, having said that, is I see that you've definitely taken direction of council that it's not here on the map. What I guess I'm going to ask you is, how much more capacity our regional roads can take, and have you factored that in, or how much time are you going to need for that? And I know we're on a tight timeline here, but I think we really need to think this through, because in places to grow, a lot of things came together, and now we've taken one factor out of how we going to handle the growth, especially in greenfield development.
So through you, Madam Chair, happy to respond to that. Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I wouldn't read too much into kind of what's on the map or not on the map. This map was prepared, before council's decision. We were just trying to show the distribution of the actual lands, and of course the ROPA 30 as approved does include corridor protection. So nothing changes in the immediate term in terms of that. That's still in place. And I would also point out that, ROPA 30 is dealing with Plan 2031 growth, and it was never sort of anticipated, that the GTA West corridor in whatever form would be in place or would be required. There are transportation improvements needed, but that the GTA West has always been sort of more of a longer term thing. So there's that. In terms of dealing with it, I think you're right. There's lots of work to do. ROPA 30, in terms of bringing the lands into the settlement boundary expansion, is really a start of now the heavy lifting to be done at the local level in terms of working out the details of the plans themselves and the land uses and that. And I think, the secondary plan process is ideally suited. That's the place to do that. And I know we look forward at the region to working with the town and the landowners on those issues for ROPA 30. And I also think you're right in terms of, more broadly speaking, the ongoing MCR process and looking at accommodating the 200,000-300,000 people in South Caledon, North Brampton, and with the shift in position from the region on that, there's going to have to be some looking at what the implications are, and I think that also is going to be stepwise in terms of some high level thinking through the allocation. And lots of heavy lifting to do in terms of looking at the specifics of the alternatives, and I think it will be a number of alternatives, not likely to be one silver bullet either. So look forward to that ongoing.
I understand it was the 2031 numbers, but the GT West corridor, or multimodal corridor, I should call it, was at discussion at the LPAT. So that's what I'm just saying. I really think we all need to, let's take a sober second thought. Let's not all get a little crazy here. Let's make sure we've got this thought out. That's what I'm asking for. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Innes?
Thank you, Adrian, and through the chair. Mayor Thompson brings up a good point. So when I first looked at this, I thought, oh, where's the protection of the corridor, which I know based on the report that you supplied to the last regional council, whether regional council deems in support of it or not, we are required to protect for that corridor. We are required to plan for that corridor, and will continue to do so unless told otherwise by the province. So, which leads me to my second question in regards to the triangle lands in option 6, because a significant portion of the triangle lands, even though it's not shown on here, does have a hold for the protection of the corridor. And I guess, have we heard back from the province yet on particulars in regards to the definition of what community lands are for their mixed use? Because I know we had asked specifically what is a mixed use availability within those PZs, and I don't recall seeing an answer back. Have we heard from them yet?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, we had heard early last year, so early in 2020, that we could expect some further direction from the province on implementation of PZs and policy framework. But to be honest, in the updates I've heard from provincial staff recently, it's been pretty quiet on that front. So I guess with other priorities and whatnot, it's fallen off a little bit. But we'll certainly follow up with provincial staff again and see where that's at. But no, I haven't seen anything.
So I think, and through the chair, I'd like to make a suggestion that not only staff follow up, but I think that our regional chair needs to follow up directly with the minister. We're getting into the crunch, the final year of finalizing our official plans, both at the town and the region. And without that definition, that makes it very difficult, because we don't know where exactly or what type of population can go into those areas. It is my first concern. And then secondly, if we are protecting, as we should be for the GTA West Transportation Corridor and Transmission Corridor, then I want to ensure that the lands that are adjacent to that corridor is being used for employment. Our experience in Mayfield West and Valleywood, people don't want to live right next to the highway. They want to live close to it. And we want to have attractive employment lands, which is easy access to the transportation corridor. So I think that we need to better understand what that definition is and make sure that we are putting the employment lands versus the community mixed use lands in the right places. I guess, which also leads me to my second follow-up question is, in regards to those PZs and the mixed use, what role does the region play versus the town play? Because my understanding has always been, with the recent changes, that the region sets the employment and the town sets the residential. So in areas where it's mixed use, such as these PZs, who's responsible for that? Is it a mix between the region and the town? And are you working together on those specific areas? Or is it the upper tier or the lower tier? I'm confused. Sorry, it's new. And it's new that the region is now responsible for the delineation of the employment land. So in this case, is where it's mixed use, who's responsible and how does that work?
So there's a bit of a mixed responsibility under the new requirements of the growth plan. The region is required to designate sort of employment areas. So those are those core employment areas, where you see sort of the manufacturing, the large industrial buildings, and where sensitive uses are prohibited. So things like residential or community uses that might have negative impacts or health impacts from the industrial uses. So, and or the opposite, those sensitive uses might prohibit some of the industrial operations from proceeding. So the region is required to do that, and we very much do that in collaboration with our local municipalities. We that's the way we operate here in Peel, and that's what we do. But ultimately, the region is responsible for that and mapping that in our official plan. Having said that, the uses within those areas and the mix and that is the local municipality can have a broad variety of uses within that, provided the sensitive uses and commercial uses are kind of limited. But within the community areas, the local municipality has the potential for looking at the distribution of those uses and allowing allowing a variety of employment type uses within those community lands, and they can work to do that. In the case of ROPA 30, for example, layered on top of that, the region will be sort of watching to ensure that the overall growth allocation associated with the settlement expansion is managed, right? So that both the population and the employment is accounted for.
And then so that's the growth in the population that's accounted for the 2031.
That's right.
In regards to the employment allocation to 2051, how will that work with the PZ that have been delineated and finding out where and how much more employment lands we require?
So that comes from the land budget. So the land budget and identifies sort of our employment needs, and we'll need to find the proper amount of land, and then working collaboratively and based on the advice of our technical experts will identify those lands. Ultimately, without guidance from the province, we're obviously taking some direction from them in terms of the PZ, but we're also bringing forward what our best advice to regional council. And ultimately, we'll do that, and at the moment in our draft, we've got some of the PZ identified as employment area in the regional official plan, and some not. And ultimately, I guess if we don't get guidance from the province before council's asked to make a decision, council will presumably make its best informed decision, and we'll send that off. Ultimately, the province is the approval authority, and they get to approve. So if they don't like what council adopts, they can presumably they could amend it and approve it differently.
Would we have to account for the lands that we're not putting in the PZ somewhere else in addition?
No, because not in my opinion. I mean, the PZ is an intention from the province in terms of broadly identifying employment opportunities. They clearly indicate that it can accommodate mixed uses, and it's really our land budget that drives our overall employment needs. And as long as we're delivering on our requirements under the growth plan to plan for our employment projections and land needs throughout the region, then that's really what I think drives it.
Okay. Thank you. It's a complex issue, lots of moving parts constantly happening. So thank you to staff, and I guess I'm very eager and interested to hear back from the province in regards to the definition of what could be, because I think that will play an impact. I guess the only other question that I have for you is based on the discussion that we had at Regional Council last week in regards to the GTA West corridor. And so my understanding and through the interpretation of the report is that we must continue to plan and proceed with that. Are we creating a plan B? Because it's a very short window, a very short amount of time. And like I mentioned last week, the area that I represent, like many areas in Caledon, has some very significant environmental features. Half the area that I represent is Oak Ridges Moraine. Part of it has the Niagara Escarpment in it. And almost all of it is regulated by the Conservation Authority. So I guess just following up on my concern that the infrastructure to support the growth that we are being mandated to take would require a significant increase in capacity on our local network. and I have concerns about the impacts on the environment that would cause. And so I'm just wondering what our plan is, until are we waiting to hear back from the province? We made an official ask, or are we proceeding status quo as is, or are we planning proceeding as status quo but with a plan B, backup option on how to accommodate this growth? Because that's a lot more money, time, and resources to create a plan B. But I'm also concerned that if we don't create a plan B, what that is going to mean to the degradation of my community that I represent. Because quite honestly, the infrastructure will not be able to support this growth. And I've seen what happens when we just try to replace a box culvert, let alone enlarge one. So I'd like to hear your comments and thoughts on that.
So through you, Madam Chair, that's something we're working on now. We're looking at reaching out back to some of the consultants and staff that have done the technical work to figure out how we best incorporate the regional council direction from last week into our ongoing MCR process and the background work that's been done. So we're not just sort of doing nothing and waiting for the province, for sure, but we're also recognizing that there's uncertainty there that we need to manage, right? In terms of we don't know exactly what the province, what the scope of the planning for the GTA West will unfold in coming months, right? So we're doing both. We're responding to the council direction, but also recognizing that we need to manage the ongoing uncertainty as well. And that's something that, as I say, we're working with our teams to develop a bit of a scope of work and a game plan for managing that. And as I think I mentioned last week, it's not easy, but managing uncertainty around the planning for the GTA West for planners in Peel has been a bit of a career. So we'll come with some good advice for you for how we manage that.
And will that advice also include the financial impact and requirements? I know we're just early into 2021, but the reality is with that corridor, the burden of that cost is going to fall onto Peel and our road infrastructure, our arterial roads. And so just wondering if we are preparing for that as well, so that we can make sure that that's included in our budget process for next year.
I'm not sure about the budget process for next year, but certainly the financial analysis as part of the municipal comprehensive review, we're looking at how we incorporate the direction from council into that ongoing work as well.
Okay, thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, thank you. I wish to support Mayor Thompson's caution on the use of MZOs, particularly in an area as murky as option 6. The MZO requested by Caledon up in option 3 was for protecting possible GO station land. We'd already lost 2 locations in the past in Caledon, further into Bolton, and we thought it was a good strategy to try and seize that until we got a proper analysis of GO train service up through there. But what's come back from the province is quite a surprise. They included the station lands, but also 40% of option 3 with this zoning. So there's no secondary plan. There's no official plan amendment. We haven't got a written decision from LPAD on the BREZ. And here we have a whole list of zoning uses.
All named Brad.
So you don't know what you're going to get if you apply for a MZO down in option 6. And I think there's so much to be unresolved. And then on a larger scale, the reckless decision for an MZO on a provincially significant wetland in Pickering, followed by a desperate attempt to exempt MZOs from the PPS, makes MZOs toxic, politically toxic right now.
We'll deal
So
with
that's
that.
my caution there. Thank you.
Councillor Kiernan?
Thank you, Adrian, and through the chair. So first of all, I guess I'm going to mirror a bit of what Councillor Innes said with regards to potential impact on our villages and hamlets and interior roadways with regards to the uncertainty of the multimodal or the GTA West or whatever we want to call it here today. But my question in reading over the agenda, and as I'm kind of new to this forum, people, I'm a bit of a keener, so I read everything. I noticed from Associate Minister Cordelia Julian's letter that they're specific and with regards to the timeline for the plan. And if I understand correctly, Adrian, so these plans are put in place with the presumption of the protection of these lands for this multimodal or GTA West corridor. So again, in regards, I think Councillor Innes touched on it briefly. How are we going to achieve this timeline, which to me seems to be a very hard timeline, if we have to come up with a plan B, if we've planned to date with the presumption of protecting and reserving these lands? If that becomes, if that changes, are we prepared to meet these timelines?
Through you, Madam Chair, we believe that we are. We believe that what we're working on here is establishing an overall regional kind of framework for managing growth, and there will need to be sort of a policy framework around that. We are planning to adjust some of the background reports that have gone into the work, and we're having our consultants look at that now. As I mentioned, we do think it's going to knock us off track, I guess, by a few months. But we also do believe that we will still be on track to bring forward a recommended, well, a ROPA for public consultation in the fall, and meet the timeline. We're working towards that anyway. That's for sure. As we mentioned last week, and I know you wouldn't have been there, but we, broadly speaking, the broad principles of our official plan and our planning work here in Peel, which has a focus on intensification above and beyond the provincial targets, a focus on increasing density, a focus on better utilizing more sustainable modes of transportation, more active transportation, more transit. All of those fundamentals remain solid. Despite sort of a shift in council position on the GTA West and an opposition to a highway. We do think that the opposition to a highway will mean for places in the north part of Brampton and the south part of Caledon, focusing on other options in terms of delivering on the transportation network, more emphasis on municipal arterial roads and collector roads and transit and active transportation, and we're looking at what that means and what that means for our work and for the official plan policy framework. So those things we think we can manage through. And we're going to do our best efforts to do that and bring our best advice to council in that regard, for sure.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And so I would have a bit of compassion for you and your staff, because this would be a big shift, because up until this, for the last whatever this timeline is, the plan has been to set aside this area as this corridor. So this is a significant shift. And to staff and to the planners, and what that's going to look like as we move forward from a regional plan point of view, and of course for the town of Caledon too.
Through Madam Chair, there's just one other point I would make is that you may recall in 2018 that the province stopped the GTA West EA and eliminated the highway at that time, and so we had to shift gears then, and we did some work and looking at the implications at that point, and got partway through that, and government changed and it shifted again. So we've. Yeah.
A wise man once told me, Adrian, the only constant in life is change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Since I see no more hands up, I'm going to ask a couple questions. When we are considering the development, greenfield development in Caledon, one of the key issues is going to be our infrastructure budget. When we designate what gets developed first, middle, and last, do we consider the infrastructure budget and the costs of each of the locations?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a couple of pieces to that. Certainly in doing the detailed distribution and allocation of growth and in the settlement boundary expansion, we do look at the servicing implications and costs, and all of those things do get factored in for sure. And then already in our existing official plan, we have some fairly strong policies around a regional role in determining phasing and staging and financing of infrastructure and that kind of thing. We're looking through this process as we've reported previously, some of the feedback and some of the issues that we're seeing, that going forward, an even more robust role for municipalities in general, our local municipalities and the region, in terms of managing the phasing, staging, timing of growth is going to be really, really important. So there'll be elements of that in the MCR and in the regional official plan, and also we're thinking that we're going to have to establish a stronger framework for managing that on an ongoing basis. Just to think that we could figure it all out and have the whole game plan for the next 30 years and just hit play is probably not realistic. So the combination of having some good policy, some good thinking into how we draw the boundaries, and then a framework for managing that going forward. And as we know, council already over the past 4 or 5 years has put in place a number of administrative processes and forums for much more engaged growth management decision making here at the region in collaboration with the local municipalities and the development industry. And those forums are getting more and more robust all the time. And I guess the recent uncertainty associated with the COVID and COVID response and that has just heightened the importance of that.
Thank you. And I just want to review for my own satisfaction. The PZ does allow for residential in the 2006 growth plan. So it does allow for residential in option 6 in the plan to 2031. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And option 6 does respect the corridor in that the triangle lands are all employment out of the LPAT, and the option 6 lands are not affected by the corridor protection. Is that correct as well?
The LPAT decision incorporated in a requirement for the corridor protection, so it's been addressed. There's no change there. Presumably, if the province changes direction on that would change. But at the moment, it's dealt with. There's sort of no issue or uncertainty there. It's
okay. Thank you. And on page 5 of this report, about halfway down, it says those residents must be attributed to other ROPA 30 lands, i.e. option 6. Caledon will have jurisdiction to adopt local official plan policies applicable to the ROPA 30 area, provided they conform with the region's official plan. The region, as the approval authority for the town's official plan, could refuse to approve an amendment should it not conform, and such a refusal could then be appealed to LPAT. The LPAT would be required to ensure that the Caledon official plan conforms with ROPA 30 and the regional official plan. Was it not part of the settlement that all parties agreed, and Caledon signed it, the province signed it, the region signed it, the developer signed it? Part of that was that there would be no more appeals to do with allocation of lands through this settlement, or am I mistaken?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, I believe you're correct in terms of minutes of settlement. There would have been that understanding.
Okay, so you put in here that it could be appealed to LPAT, but that might not be true? I'm not trying to catch you up. I'm just trying to get it clear in my own head. Never would I try to catch you up, Adrian.
My sense is that that there's nothing to fetter regional council from undertaking its I guess the abilities that it has under the Planning Act.
Okay, thank you. And just to reinforce, one of the things you said was, or someone said, was eventually it goes to the province as the final approval body. Since they did sign on to the LPAT settlement, one would suggest that if anything went to the province that included residential in option 6, it would not be refused.
Yeah, and this particular thing won't have to go to the province for approval. This is because this is an amendment to the plan and a local official plan amendment. Ultimately, it's unless there's an appeal, as I say, it's a local and regional council's decisions.
Good, and I appreciate the fact that the councillors speaking today from Caledon all suggest that we should stop requesting MZOs. Coincidentally, it's for option 6, but we won't get into that because the rounding out section B was an MZO request. The option 3 was an MZO request based on Go Station, which we've been told won't be built for 20 years. So given that they are not going to ask for any more MZOs, it sounds like we might be able to get on with the business of getting into the greenfield planning up there without the little surprises that keep popping up every time an MZO comes through. Thank you. I just had to comment on that. We spend a lot of time going back and reviewing decisions of council, decisions of LPAT, decisions of council on the GTA West, and we're spending a lot of time on this. What I would like to, and I see Alan Thompson's hands up again, what I'd like when our minutes go forward to council next Thursday, I'd like this 5.6 attached to it. It's an important issue. There are questions from all of the members of council on this, and I would like all the members of council to have an opportunity to look at it. I'm going to check with the clerk to make sure it's appropriate to attach this report. Alan, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. One for clarification. One thing with all of Caledon's major planning, even in the Bolton area, very similar to what we're doing to Simpson Road, we've taken it, is everything that's done because the cost of infrastructure is the development, bring the applications forward, all have to front end load. And then they get reimbursed through development charges as it gets built out. That is one way of taking the pressure off the region. It's a practice that we've been doing in Caledon for years, and I think that needs to be considered, or can that be considered, I guess, Adrian, as we go forward, especially when we're doing the MCR. It's a practice we're already practicing, and I think that's just something we need to put in writing to move forward. Everybody pretty much understands that when they come to DART. And secondly, back to the chair, is as far as an MZO in option 6, my understanding is the landowners are not to appeal each other. If we give one MZO to option 6, then we need to do it for all of them. But I think at this point in time, that's not going to help anything. I really think we need to think this thing through and make sure we get it right in how we plan. So that's all I'm asking for. I think it just creates a lot of pressure on staff, and we're just going to get the wrong kind of development we want. We want public consultation. It's put to bed. Let's start to move forward, and we've had a really engaged public so far on our official plan here in Caledon, and I'm not about to change the table. And I think where you heard where Councillor Sinclair's coming from and what Councillor Innes has had to deal with, I think it makes a lot of sense where we need to go. But Adrian, I guess my question back to you is, with the front end loading, as we've been practicing in Caledon, should that be included as the right of what goes forward as we do this? So that it's easy for us to understand. We accept it in Caledon, but Brampton, Mississauga don't understand our concept of planning. But I'm just saying, is that something that can be considered?
Through you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. As I mentioned, in ROPA 30, there is a policy that does require, some really careful attention to the administrative and financing and timing and staging, and part of that would be around who pays when and how that gets managed. So that's something that's clearly looked at. As there is existing policies in our official plan generally that allow for and encourage that kind of thing. And I think just overall, in our MCR, a more robust framework around, how we manage, the risks associated with infrastructure for sure is something.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
I would also like a report on that, actually, because as you say, Mississauga and Brampton have not been enamored of that process. What we keep being told is it really ends up losing us money in the long run because the front end loading is at current prices, the DC credits are at future prices, and the DC credits are actually for the next round of developers that come in. So I would like a really detailed report on that to come back to this committee and possibly then to council, because I know it's not a policy that we've done a lot of building down in Mississauga, but it's not a policy that we've ever employed. And I recall that Councillor Innes asked last meeting if we could have an explanation as to how Caledon's planning is quite different from the rest of the region. I didn't see it in this agenda, so that might be a way of touching on that question as well. We've got an hour left and a lot of work to do. Jennifer, can you ask a brief question, please?
Sure. Just for clarification, when the report comes forward, I think that it's very important that the map that you show actually includes the GTA West corridor as well as PZ. I think it has to be a wholesome, complete picture that we're going to show to everybody. And so I think that needs to be included. And then just, I think it's very important that when we're talking about MZOs and Caledon's request, I think that it has to be very clear that Caledon has been very consistent in saying that we want to build complete communities and communities that are transit oriented. And whether I'm going to get the help and support of my regional colleagues, which we haven't up until this point, I think that we have to do our responsibility as Caledon Council and do everything within our powers to build complete communities and transit-oriented communities. And that's just what we have done. And I think that those are actually principles that we have within the region's framework. I think regional staff supported Caledon's position. It's unfortunate that our colleagues around this table didn't, because it is environmentally the right way to move forward in planning. And I hope that we take that into consideration as we plan out to 2051, so that Caledon isn't forced to plan things and build complete communities and have transit-oriented communities, because that is environmentally the best thing to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Innes. CAO Baker?
Sorry, there's also Patrick O'Connor on the list, Councillor Parrish.
Okay, I can't see him on my board, but I will have Janice first and then Patrick.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to manage some expectations about the financial piece. I mean, at this point, we certainly would have very few, if any, detailed financial numbers around this future development. And this whole conversation about the role of development charges versus the role of front-ending some of these things. I mean, I think they are all tools in the toolbox for sure, but they have to be carefully considered. And yes, there are risks to front-end loading. There are risks to development charges. I mean, we have gaps right now between our development charge forecast and what we're actually collecting. And there are some systemic issues in there. There are economic issues in there. So I just want to be clear that there's no possible way that we have the information to be able to bring you a comprehensive financial forecast of, how we might use DCs versus front-end loading. So if that's what the committee is looking for, I don't believe we are in a position to deliver that right now. I think what we could bring forward to you are as kind of a broader fiscal framework of when you would consider front ending versus when you would not. I think with regional infrastructure as compared to local infrastructure for water and wastewater, that in itself drives a much different conversation. All of our infrastructure has to go in up front. It's very expensive. It's very large. So the role of front ending in that environment, I don't think is comparable to some of the issues that Caledon might be looking at. So, this is a really complex conversation. And I think Adrian has really said it well. What we really need is control. What we really need is the final say in terms of when, how much, what type of infrastructure that we put in place. And so a review of the policies to make sure that we have that level of control is critical and is part of the work that's being done. So I just wanted to clarify the expectations of the committee around what it is you want us to bring forward, because it's not going to have numbers. It's not going to have a forecast. It's really going to be much more of that concept of how do we control. Happy to do that, because I think that we have an answer to.
Well, thank you, Janice. And that's exactly what I was thinking of when I asked the question. More of a philosophical overview of the concepts rather than specific dollars and cents. I think that would be perfect.
Okay.
Patrick? Thanks, Janice. Patrick?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make an observation about the discussion earlier concerning the settlement of ROPA 30. And to offer the assurance that that was very carefully prepared to ensure that municipal decision-making, municipal planning authority was retained, so that the undertakings among some of the private parties not to appeal each other's development proposals is not extending in any way to prevent the region from exercising its approval authority, or indeed the town from asserting an appeal. And the scheme that is described on page 5 of the report in terms of how that would work and how LPAT figures into the future planning is quite succinct and quite accurate, and I would commend it to the committee.
Good. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. Jennifer, very briefly, please. We've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, in regards to the servicing costs in the report coming forward, I think it's also important that we include the information on how the costs are associated with the intensification projects in Brampton and Mississauga as a comparison, and then the planning of once the infrastructure is put in place. As an example, for options 1 and 2 and 3, as required under the settlement, how that cost needs to be paid for in the next phase to 2051 of development by rounding out and finishing those communities, building complete communities, so that we actually get that cost back. I think that needs to be an understanding of some of our Brampton and Mississauga colleagues who may not understand that now we are required to put the servicing there to 2031. How do we not be left on the hook of that cost as a region without rounding out and finishing?
Okay, thank you. I think the CAO has a generally good idea of what we want, but she also has an idea of what she can produce. So let's see what the report looks like, and we can ask further questions at the time it's produced. I have a lot of faith in the CAO being able to produce what we need. Okay, can someone move receipt of this report? Mayor
if
Thompson?
I may, Madam Chair, it's Stephanie. Yes. Just for a point of clarification, the minutes of today's meeting was initially intended for April 8th. However, if the committee wishes that the minutes go to council next week, we can do that with the attached ROPA 30 report as you've requested.
I think that would be it would be good. The longer we leave it, I would appreciate that if you can do it without putting the staff through too much angst.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to 5 reports 5.1. Adrian, are you the band leader for this?
Thank you. Yes, through Madam Chair, and sort of in your hands, we've covered a little. Actually, it turned out to have covered a little bit of this, a lot of this already through through the discussion. So we can go through that, or the materials there, the slides are there. If there's any questions, we can entertain that, or we can skip on to the next item. And happy either way.
So you think 5.1 is covered, and I'll just check and see if there are any questions on 5.1. Seeing none, Councillor Kiernan, can you move receipt of 5.1? Thank you. Any objections? Okay, we'll go to 5.2. You ready for Mark? Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Head, and I'm a manager in the Regional Planning and Growth Management Division. And thank you for the opportunity to present on our PL 2041 Plus Regional Official Plan Review. Today's agenda includes presentations on the environment and resources themed reviews that are included in PL 2041. The overview will be followed with more detailed presentations on 3 of the 7 focus areas that make up the environment and resources work. We look forward to presenting the work and hopefully providing information on additional components in future committee agendas. Next slide, please. The initial work plan for the region's official plan review identified a number of focus areas. This slide highlights the environment and resources focus areas that are considering policy revisions to address provincial conformity and consistency requirements, but also to ensure the region's environment and resources policy framework reflects best practice and meets regional needs. Staff presentations are provided today on 3 of the highlighted areas, climate change, water resources, and Greenland system. And although these are identified separately, the focus areas and policy framework for the environment and resources sections of the plan are very much integrated with other elements, so that growth is managed based on an integrated systems approach. The regional official plan is guided by an overarching theme of sustainability that incorporates an environmental imperative to protect, enhance, and improve the region's natural ecosystems. The plan's framework recognizes the importance of the region's significant landscapes, its rural areas, agricultural lands, and natural resources. And the policies of the plan are being reviewed in recognition of the region's planning needs to manage growth, to respond to anticipated changes in Peel's environment, in particular climate change, and to be consistent with revised provincial policy direction. Next slide, please. And this slide just simply highlights some of the key objectives and outcomes of the proposed policies. Next slide, please. I just want to note that the region is subject to a number of provincial plans which provide policy direction for environmental, natural heritage, water resources, agricultural, and mineral aggregates planning. The province's coordinated land use planning review of provincial plans and review of the provincial policy statement introduced comprehensive changes to provincial policy. These changes have harmonized policy direction and introduced climate change more formally to be addressed in municipal official plans. The PPS and growth plan require identification and mapping of agricultural and rural systems, natural heritage systems, and water resource systems to be provided in official plans. The PPS and provincial greenbelt plans have been updated to harmonize natural heritage and agricultural policies, definitions, and land use permissions. And the Clean Water Act requires mapping of vulnerable source protection areas, including wellhead protection areas, and policies that conform to approved source protection plans. And more details on these requirements are provided in the presentations. Just broadly, there is new emphasis on integrated planning for growth, infrastructure, finance, and the environment that needs to be reflected in policies, but also in the studies we're undertaking to support planning decisions. And for example, climate change, watershed planning, natural heritage planning, agricultural impact, and mineral aggregates impact assessments have been incorporated into the technical studies we're undertaking to support the settlement area boundary expansion study for planning growth and land needs to 2051. Next slide, please. A key aspect of the review is that provincial requirements are more directive with guidance and mapping. And this slide indicates some of the policy guidance and mapping that needs to be incorporated into the regional plan, with refinements to ensure that regional and local requirements and studies are being considered. And next slide, please. To help with consultation, we have completed technical background and mapping studies and have brought that information into a series of discussion papers. This slide indicates some of the topics addressed, and in total, we've posted 18 discussion papers and studies on the environment and resources focus areas. Most of the work is now complete and available on the Peel 2041 project website for comment. We are in the process of completing background work on the mineral aggregate resources policy review, which will come a bit later in the work plan, and which will then complete the environment and resources work in Peel 2041. The illustration on the right is just simply gives you an idea of the kind of information that we're providing to agencies, stakeholders, and the public. Next slide, please. As for any of our work, collaboration is important. Peel staff and local municipal staff have been working together on focus areas included in the official plan review. Consultation with provincial ministries include, in this case, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food, Rural Affairs, Ministry of Environment, Conservation, Parks, MNRF, and Ministry of Environment, Northern Development, and Mines. We've worked closely with the Office of Climate Change and local municipal staff on climate policy to ensure we have technical information supporting the review. Source protection committees and conservation authorities have provided approved source protection plans with policies and mapping to protect drinking water supplies. And we've also undertaken joint studies with the conservation authorities and the town of Caledon on specific topics, including natural heritage system mapping, completing a LEAR study to identify prime agricultural areas, and we are currently working on a joint policy review for mineral aggregate resources. Next slide, please. Public engagement has been undertaken in phases. As shown on this slide, environment-related policies were shared at public open houses in March last year, at various community events prior to the state of emergency, in virtual public sessions last September, as well as through the Peel 2041 project website, including posting of discussion papers, draft policies and mapping with interactive web maps, virtual open house displays, and through social media. The information has been provided to reach a broad range of audiences, including the general public, stakeholders, and municipal partners, agencies, and Indigenous communities. The September consultations did include a presentation on findings of draft technical studies being prepared to support the identification of a settlement area boundary expansion, and these are highlighted. We have received comments from a number of stakeholders on draft policies prepared to date and continue to consider these comments as we prepare a draft regional official plan amendment. Next slide, please. And this is the process and timeline that we presented at the February Planning and Growth Management Committee meeting. The environment and resources focus area policies and mapping are being incorporated into a draft ROPA that we expect will be presented to the committee and council potentially in early summer for endorsement to proceed with statutory consultation in the fall and adoption in late 2021 or early 2022. We are in the process of reviewing the work plan and making adjustments further to council direction regarding the GTA West corridor received on March 11th. And during this process, there will be ongoing agency, stakeholder, local, municipal, conservation authority, and Indigenous consultation. Next slide, please. And so regarding next steps, minor revisions to the overall policies are anticipated with the objective of finalizing draft policies by spring-summer 2021. We continue to work collaboratively with local municipal staff and other stakeholders to ensure there is consistency throughout the regional plan as we bring the final focus areas come together. We are also working collaboratively with local municipal staff and other stakeholders as we complete technical studies, refine boundaries, and develop policy for the settlement area boundary expansion focus area. Again, taking into account council's direction on the GTA West corridor. And in that process, we'll be reviewing the work and adjusting timing of remaining steps with the objective of still meeting the July 2022 conformity deadline. The goal today is to obtain your feedback on the information presented. The inputs will help us inform our ongoing engagement work and development of updated regional official plan MCR amendment. We'll be bringing forward additional growth management and environment topics in upcoming meetings of the committee. And this concludes my presentation. Next slide, please. So through you, Madam Chair, if there are any questions on the overview and overall process, I'm happy to take those, bearing in mind that we will be providing more detailed information on the focus areas in the presentations that follow. And thank you.
We have Councillor Sinclair on the list, Madam Chair.
Okay, finally. Sorry. I have, we'll go to the committee members first. We have Councillor Thompson first, and then Councillor Sinclair, Councillor Downey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's going to be rather quick. One thing, Mark, I want to say thank you for looking at agricultural systems as a system. I really appreciate that, especially with COVID and looking at the Lear study, which we're 30 years behind, but I think a very good study. My question is you like the example where we had Phil Winters delegating last week at council. You know, he's a guy that has a farm, grows his own hops, you know, has his barley growing next door, produces his own beer. The challenge we have going forward is, what is agriculture going to look like in the next 50 years? My question is to you, should we be looking at general ag versus prime ag because it gives us a lot more latitude, especially with COVID? We have a lot of people venturing out looking for things to do. They're hitting their villages, but there's a lot of these others that can capture the opportunity, very similar to Prince Edward County. And I was just wondering, is that something we can look at? Because I do believe in the provincial policy statement, prime egg is excellent, but that's for southwestern Ontario where food production is extremely high. But what we are is near urban agriculture, and I'm just wondering, is that something that we can consider? I know we've been talking to this at Caledon, but I'm asking you the same question.
Yes, we can in this particular way. We, as I mentioned, we had the direction, the very specific guidance from province, policy implementation procedures and mapping to identify prime agricultural areas, and we've undertaken a mapping study to do that very carefully to be consistent with that provincial direction. We've been able to refine some boundaries based on local information. The general ag question, I think, gets balanced out because the agricultural land base consists both of prime ag areas and rural lands. So the rural lands provide that extra flexibility both to permit agriculture, but also additional flexibility for other uses. So I think we will definitely take that input back and look at it through that framework.
Well, I'm even asking, you know, the lands in the green belt, right? Strictly the green belt lands. You know, the prime egg is prime egg in the white belt, but I'm just saying the green belt, that's something we can consider. I'll throw that back at you. I know we're really tight on time and there's other questions, but I know this is where we've been kicking around, but thank you so much for the work you've done.
Great.
Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, through the chair. I just find the consultation as, because of COVID and the preoccupation of the public, including myself, has been unsatisfactory. I really don't think the citizens of Ward 1, Town of Caledon, really understand the implications of the aggregate policies that are coming forward, and the water policies and the natural environmental policies. So I don't know how to get that going, but I think we missed it. Thank you.
And Councillor Downey?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I wasn't anticipating participating this morning, but I am here. So, Mark, it's nice to see you. And I feel like I haven't seen you in years. So, just in regards to the ag system, as we have our, our colleagues to the south and their newfound love of preserving farmland and corridors, I'm wondering if potentially you could look at the farm systems or bring back to this committee more information and a more robust agricultural look, maybe something that's more in alignment with Halton's agricultural plan, that really outlines where Peel is on the food value chain and the food value network. And I'm sure that at the Golden Horseshoe Food and Farming Alliance, there may be some opportunities to support that type of work. I think that, Peel is a spoke in a much larger wheel when it comes to the food value chain and how goods are moved. So I don't know kind of where it lies. And I think that we've always kind of moved in one direction in that piece, knowing what our planning looks like in Peel. But now that things have shifted slightly, I think there may be room for a more robust look at the goods movement and the connectivity with the food value chain in terms of agriculture and Peel.
Okay. Yes, we can build that into future presentations on the agriculture and rural systems. Give you an update on what we have been involved with in terms of food systems planning and some of the direction we're including in our policies about that. So we'll do that.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I guess Councillor Thompson, would you move receipt, please? No objections. We'll go to 5.3, and thank you, Mark. This is Derek Lau and Climate Change Policy Review. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the Planning Growth Management Committee. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk about the region's climate change focus area as part of the overall Peel 2041 Plus official plan review. My name is Derek Lau, and this presentation will provide an overview of our approach to integrating policy direction for climate change mitigation and adaptation as part of the overall regional official plan review as well as how a climate change framework is being applied to the growth management and settlement area boundary expansion work. The Climate Change Policy Review provides the draft framework for policy directions to support compact, mixed-use, transit-supportive, and resilient communities. The policy review also aligns with the region's declaration of a climate emergency. We are proposing a framework to respond to this priority that is aligned to provincial direction and the region's declaration. Next slide, please. The Peel 2041 Plus official plan review and municipal comprehensive review process is being undertaken to ensure consistency and conformity with the current plan and policy direction, including those related to climate change planning. This includes guidance and direction found at the international, federal, and provincial levels, which forms a foundational component for the draft climate change policies in the regional official plan. As well, from a land use planning perspective, the province has recently updated planning legislation and policy direction in the Planning Act, Provincial Policy Statement, Growth Plan, and Greenbelt plans, and requires policies to mitigate, adapt, and be resilient to climate change. The Provincial Land Use Planning Policy Direction provides the basis for integrating and embedding climate change policy direction as part of the region's official plan review process. Next slide, please. The region has been working on climate change initiatives with its community partners since 2009 to collectively address climate change in Peel. In 2011, the Peel Climate Change Partnership completed the Peel Climate Change Strategy and has since completed several other projects as they implement actions under the current low carbon communities, flood resiliency, and natural green infrastructure strategies. The input of the partnership and its members has informed this policy review as part of the official plan, including the development of new urban forest and water resource policies in the draft official plan. As well, Council adopted its corporate climate change master plan in 2019, which highlights the importance of land use planning policies to support the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and community vulnerability to climate impacts. Next slide, please. Other examples of some of the collaborative projects and actions completed through the partnership include the updating of the greenhouse gas inventory for the region and vulnerability assessment, which helps us adapt to climate change. The vulnerability assessments concluded that the risk and vulnerabilities identified for Peel include impacts to public health, loss of key ecosystem services, increased risk from urban flooding, potential impact to infrastructure, increased risk to agricultural production, and higher demands on local government services. The region's official plan review includes working with the partners to collaborate, align, and support climate action implementation. Next slide, please. So as shown in the overview presentation, climate change is one of the 13 focus areas being addressed through the region's official plan review process. Through the climate change focus area, a comprehensive and integrated systems approach is being proposed that would connect the different policy areas of the region official plan. This approach is supported through consultations with provincial staff, local municipal staff, special working groups, the conservation authorities, the development industry, stakeholders, and the public. In summary, a new climate change policy section in the regional official plan is being added, and policies are being embedded throughout the official plan in other key theme areas as highlighted on this slide. Next slide, please. The new standalone climate change policy section provides a connection to the built environment, the natural environment, and the region protected landscapes. Broad climate goals and the framework for collaborative climate change planning is provided with direction to conduct greenhouse gas emission inventories, undertake adaptation planning, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction planning. The framework enables the incorporation of climate change policies in other key areas of the official plan, including growth management, transportation, housing, energy, waste, water resources, natural hazards, natural heritage, including urban forest and agriculture. This also provides a consistent framework to support the growth management and settlement area boundary expansion focus areas, which supports the overall development of compact, mixed-use, transit-supportive, and resilient communities. Next slide, please. Energy is another critical aspect of climate mitigation, and key policies are being included to provide appropriate direction to promote energy conservation, efficiency, and diversity. We've added new policies to ensure alternative and renewable energy systems, including district energy, are considered and implemented in future development within existing areas and new green fields that work towards achieving low carbon communities. We've also added new policies to support improving energy conservation and efficiency through building design and construction practices, including green roofs to reduce urban heat island impacts and electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which are all aimed at reducing overall energy consumption and supporting emerging technologies. The links between energy and climate change are critical to the response of addressing climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this updated energy policy framework provides the guidance towards the achievement of the development of energy efficient and low carbon communities. Next slide, please. Incorporating sustainable development in planning occurs at different scales and utilize policy, tools, and guidelines to minimize the impact on the environment and promote the development of low carbon, compact, and complete communities. So we've updated policies that outline regional interests related to sustainable development and provide direction to require through the coordination and support of local municipal implementation of green development standards, which collectively helps adapt the region to climate change. The region continues to support and participate in work being completed at the local municipal level, including updates to the City of Mississauga and Brampton's existing green development standards, as well as direction in the Town of Caledon's Community Climate Change Action Plan for the creation of sustainable development standards. Next slide, please. The Climate Change Policy Review provides a comprehensive and integrated systems approach, which not only applies to the policies in the official plan, but also to the supporting work that's being undertaken as part of the municipal comprehensive review. Building on the climate change framework as discussed, as well as the foundational research conducted by the Peel Climate Change Partnership, a climate change lens has also been developed to support the growth management work. The climate change lens includes considerations to climate change mitigation and adaptation in key theme areas aligned with the framework of the Peel 2041 Plus focus areas. The lens criteria also links the considerations back to key planning and policy requirements within the growth plan and provincial policy statement to provide policy connections to support decision-making and demonstrate how conformity and consistency is being addressed. Next slide, please. The climate lens and the draft regional official plan climate change policy framework is being used to inform the overall growth management work at a high level. The climate change lens supports and informs the ongoing municipal comprehensive work and draft urban structure that was presented to the February Planning Growth Management Committee meeting. We showed a shift towards intensification to accommodate a significant amount of growth, the requirement of higher density housing stock, and meeting and exceeding density targets for new greenfield areas, which together support the development of compact, mixed-use, and transit-oriented community. Next slide, please. Integrated with this framework is the region's policy updates that support a shift towards moving people by sustainable modes of transportation, such as walking, cycling, transit, and carpooling, which will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We've updated policies that support active transportation that is connected to designated nodes such as transit terminals, urban growth centers, GO stations, major transit station areas, and mobility hubs. The updated policies are intended to minimize and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, the impacts on the natural environment, and improve public health outcomes by supporting transportation alternatives for everyone in the region. Next slide, please. And finally, similar to the growth management focus area, a climate lens has also been developed for the settlement area boundary expansion work that is aligned with the climate change framework and is embedded in the supporting technical studies. We are beginning to apply the results of the various technical studies, which includes considerations to support the settlement area boundary expansion work to address both climate change adaptation and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Technical studies with climate change components include transportation, an environmental screening and scopes of watershed study, agricultural impact assessment, health assessment, and an energy and emissions reduction study. Scoped as an additional study, the Energy and Emissions Reduction Study specifically addresses energy planning and opportunities and requirements for alternative and renewable energy systems to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in new community areas. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation for today, which provided an overview of the approach and integrating policy direction for climate change mitigation and adaptation as part of the overall official plan review work, as well as highlighting how climate change considerations are being applied to other areas, including growth management and the settlement boundary expansion work. I thank you this morning for your attention, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Derek. I don't see any questions, but I'm not going to stir the pot because we're getting close to the closing time on the committee, and I have something else right after. So seeing no questions, Councillor Starr, could you move receipt of the report? Got it. Any objections? None? Thank you very much, Derek. That was a good report. Always a good report if it inspires no questions. Okay, 5.4 Water Resources Policy Review and Update. Gail Anderson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Gail Anderson, and I'm a Principal Planner in the Regional Planning and Growth Management Division. And I'm the project manager for the Water Resources Policy and Mapping Review component of the PL 2041 Plus Regional Official Plan Review. So this presentation will provide you with an overview of the proposed water resources policies and mapping amendments to the Regional Official Plan. Next slide, please. When referring to water resources, I'm speaking of the ecological resource and not the hard infrastructure, such as water treatment plants. Peel's water resources are interrelated systems of ground and surface water features and areas. And these include features such as aquifers, groundwater recharge areas, rivers, streams, wetlands, lakes, etc. The Credit River, the Humber River, Etobicoke, Mimico Creeks, and their tributaries form the major watersheds in Peel and provide the logical boundaries for us to undertake our watershed planning. Planning for water resources is focused on the land use planning tools to protect the ecological integrity of these features and areas from the adverse effects associated with development and growth. Next slide, please. Since 2012, there have been a series of new or updated provincial policies and plans which provide direction to municipalities regarding water resources protection, conservation, and management. And the most recent changes were in 2020 to the provincial policy statement. The water resources policies in the regional official plan must conform to these pieces of legislation, as well as a tool and an opportunity to address regionally identified needs. Some of the key changes to the provincial policies which are being addressed through this official plan review do include the requirement for water resource systems, features, and areas to be mapped, for ground and surface water quantity and quality to be protected, improved, and restored through tools such as watershed planning, stormwater management best practices, and as well as applying that climate change impact consideration. And one of the other key areas that is being addressed are protection of sources of municipal drinking water from incompatible land uses. Next slide, please. I want to provide a bit more detail on source water protection component because it is a substantial policy change. Source water protection stems from the Clean Water Act, which is a provincial legislation that establishes a framework for protecting municipal sources of drinking water. It does include requirements for land use policies to be implemented and included in municipal official plans. Through the Clean Water Act implementation process, source protection plans were developed by local committees. In the case of Peel Region, the committees were led by our conservation authorities. And these locally developed source protection plans were then approved by the province. The policies in the source protection plans were informed by assessment reports. And these assessment reports are essentially a summary of research and provide the technical background that assessed the threats to drinking water and the mapping of vulnerable areas. The source protection plans set out both land use planning and non-land use planning requirements that must be undertaken in order to achieve drinking water protection outcomes. Through the PL 2041 Plus official plan review and process, only the land use planning policies in the source protection plans will be brought into the regional official plan. Next slide, please. Discussion papers were developed by regional staff and are available on the region's website to assist the public in understanding the provincial policy drivers and the proposed regional official plan policy direction. The first paper, Roles and Responsibilities, sorts out the who does what in terms of the watershed planning and stormwater management, as well as provides background on how the federal, provincial, and municipal governments fit into the water resource management picture. And this paper helps to set the framework for the second discussion paper, which provides policy options for the regional level official plan. Due to the detailed requirements of the Clean Water Act, a more detailed discussion paper on source water protection requirements was prepared and is available on the region's website. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to discuss the proposed official plan policies. So the growth plan now directs that municipalities undertake watershed planning and to use the watershed and sub-watershed guidance to inform other land use planning processes. For example, as shown on the diagram on this slide, decisions on allocation of growth and settlement boundary expansions are to be informed by applicable watershed planning. As a result of the new provincial policy direction, the region is proposing to update the official plan by updating section 2.2.5, water resources systems, to insert the protect, improve, and restore water quality and water quantity language that's found in the provincial plans. We're also looking to require the identification of a water resource system of features and areas, to require the use of low impact development and green infrastructure only when appropriate, and to require appropriate hydrological and hydrogeological studies. We're also going to be updating section 2.2.6, watersheds, to ensure watershed planning is being used to protect hydrological features and areas and their functions. The proposed policies reflect the direction in the growth plan, which require decisions on allocation of growth and the planning for water, wastewater, and stormwater to be informed by watershed planning. The intended outcome is to provide an evidence-based planning that integrates planning for infrastructure growth in the environment. And this just helps to ensure that our water resources systems and natural heritage systems are protected. Next slide, please. The growth plan and the PPS now encourage municipalities to use stormwater management best practices in order to achieve a series of water resource quality and quantity related goals. For example, municipalities are now required to develop stormwater master plans for service settlement areas. And these plans are to be informed by watershed planning and incorporate appropriate low impact development and green infrastructure. Stormwater management involves shared responsibility among the local municipalities, the conservation authorities in the region. But it's fully recognized that the primary lead responsibility for planning, management, and implementation of stormwater master planning is at the local level. The key policies being added to the regional official plan include guidance on the content of stormwater master plans, requirements for the use of stormwater management best practices, requirements to integrate stormwater management, green infrastructure, and low impact development best practices during the development process. The region has been working very closely with our local and regional public works stormwater management staff, as well as planning staff and conservation authorities throughout the development of these proposed policies. Next slide, please. The region will be inserting the applicable provincially approved and currently in effect land use policies from the source water protection plans into the regional official plan. So the proposed official plan policy structure will identify the high-level goals related to protecting sources of drinking water, then recognize the applicable source water protection plans, identify what has been defined as vulnerable areas under the provincial legislation, provide direction on restrictions to development and site alteration, and then incorporate the policies to either prohibit or regulate specific land uses, which are listed in the Clean Water Act as significant drinking water threats within vulnerable areas. And all of this is in accordance with the approved source protection plans. The regional staff have worked jointly with the source protection committees, as well as the town of Caledon staff when translating these policies into the regional official plan. And I just wanted to note that the source protection plans were approved by the province and came into effect in 2015, and the region and the town have already been working jointly to implement the land use policies. Next slide, please. To support the source water protection policies, the region will need to provide mapping of the vulnerable areas in the Clean Water Act, including wellhead protection areas and intake protection zone mapping. As well, the region will need to delineate the vulnerability scores for all wellheads in the region. And all of this information comes from the provincially approved source protection plans. The map on the left shows the regional drinking water wells in the town of Caledon and the protection zones around the wells. These areas represent the time of travel, meaning if a contaminant entered the soil at a particular location, the amount of time it would take for that contaminant to travel to and reach a regional drinking water well. The zones of influence around the wells may therefore restrict what land uses could be allowed within those zones. The map on the right shows the intake protection zones, and these are the areas on the land and water surrounding a surface water body intake. So essentially the pipes in Lake Ontario that take water into the lake-based treatment plants. And the policies for the intake protection zones in the source water protection plan do not identify any land uses that are considered a significant drinking water threat, and therefore there are no associated land use policy restrictions. The Lake Ontario-based drinking water threats are regulated through other tools, not land use planning. So therefore the region is only identifying the area on a map because we're required to do so by the province. Next slide, please. As directed by the provincial policy statement, the region will be mapping a water resource system. So the proposed series of schedules identify the features and areas that make up the system. This identification will be on 3 maps. The first map shows the features and areas such as water courses and wetlands. And the next 2 maps, which are also mapping requirements under the Clean Water Act, show the significant drinking water recharge areas and the highly vulnerable aquifers. Next slide, please. There are other more minor amendments which are being made to the regional official plan. The Lake Ontario policies in the regional official plan will be updated, and the overall policy structure will remain the same. However, references to initiatives and strategies have been updated. Also, we're proposing to insert a new section, 2.2.10, the Lake Simcoe section. And this is being added because there is a portion of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, the Lake Simcoe watershed, that does enter into Peel region in the northeast corner of Caledon. And there are some policies in the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan that therefore have to be reflected in the regional official plan. Next slide, please. It is anticipated that we are going to be holding consultations again in the fall, and then based on those consultations and feedback received, undertaking any final refinements that need to be made as a result. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time this morning. Through you, Madam Chair, are there any questions?
Thank you, Gail. I can just give me a second. I can see one hand. Councillor Kiernan? No hand up?
No, I'm sorry, Chair, my hand's not up that I know of.
Okay, Councillor Sinclair. Yep, Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah. Thank you. Through the chair. In the regional, there's a set of development approved also by Ministry of Environment called Settlement Service Master Plans. And the idea was to conduct secondary plans on the villages in Caledon and consider servicing at the same time so that the standard of practice would be deemed to meet an environmental assessment. Have those policies been maintained in this new plan?
At this time, through you, Madam Chair, at this time we're not removing any existing policies. We are simply looking to update the policies to ensure conformity with the updated provincial plans and legislation.
Okay, thank you. Next question deals with the wellhead protection areas, slide 54-9. And I find a couple of them amazing. The one for the well at Orangeville at the top end of Highway 10 seems to indicate an area of influence for the well. That the well is located immediately beside the very narrow, small Credit River. And over the years, I've learned that it's a poorly constructed well, and there was political influence in its approval. So I'm amazed that, for example, Island Lake is a swampy body of water that was developed as a low-flow augmentation pond to dilute Orangeville sewage in summer months. And they never took the topsoil off, never took the stumps out. So the water's quite eutrophied when it comes out into the creek heading towards that well. Then it goes down a little further the creek, and the ball diamonds in Orangeville above the fast food restaurant, that's the old town dump. And that's exposed and leaching into the creek. And then you come down further, and the Orangeville sewage treatment plant dumps into the creek above this well. And it's only rated to treat to secondary effluent, not tertiary. And then you have the entire area of Orangeville draining down into that. So all the hydrocarbons and pet doo-doo and so on, all drain down there. So I just question that wellhead protection area. The other one that concerns me is for Alton. And you've got a strange draw area there that's quite unusual for all of them. And it seems to be linear, at least 4 miles long, terminating in a gravel pit up in East Garifraxa. And there's no indication there that any of the waters draining from the septic systems in Alton going into Shaw's Creek and heading directly towards those wells are an influence. So those two ones really bother me because they seem to be in denial of what the real threats are. So is it possible to get detailed information of what the assumptions are in those wellhead protection areas?
For you, Madam Chair, yes, that information is available in the background studies and the assessment reports. And yes, that information can be sent to you, Councillor Sinclair.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Know your stuff in, and it sounds like Orangeville needs a little bit of a spanking up there, and maybe we need to somehow publicize to the rest of the world what they're contributing to our drinking water. That sounds pretty gross. Alan?
Yeah,
Alan,
real quick. Hi, Gail. How are you? The one thing that when you look at their page 10, the groundwater recharge areas really defines where the green belt is. It's rather unique if you really want to get into refining it. It identifies.
World is not enough.
My second question is the for the what they call the protection area, Lake Simcoe. Is that the border of the Oak Ridges Moraine coming up against the Paris Moraine on the west side of Caledon?
For you, Madam Chair, yes, that's correct. It's on the northwest corner of Caledon.
Yeah. So basically, it's just basically defining the Oak Ridges Moraine versus the Paris Moraine.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, it's defining the watershed that's draining into the Lake Simcoe Basin.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just it's funny when you drew those lines. I'm saying, well, that's almost where the Paris Moraine meets up against the Oak Ridges. So it's rather interesting. I would love to put those maps over just to see how close it is on that. So thank you very much for that. For timeliness, let's move on. I can ask other questions later.
okay, and you'll move receipt, Alan? Okay, no objections. And we have one last report, Greenland System Policies and Mapping. Thank you, Gail, by the way, thank you. This is Larry Miller. Down here, I see you.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the Greenland System Policy Review component of PL 2041+. The presentation this morning will cover the background research we have completed and the proposed policies were included in the review and mapping. Next slide, please. The Greenland systems, also referred to as the natural heritage systems, are broadly defined as systems made up of natural heritage features and areas and linkages that connect features and provide for the movement of plants and animals. A healthy functioning Greenland system is a key component of a complete community. Protecting, restoring, and enhancing natural heritage systems in Peel is a key objective in planning sustainable communities, in managing impacts of growth on the environment, and mitigating climate change. Protected natural systems ensure the region is resilient to climate shifts and extreme weather, and residents have access to green space for recreation and mental health. Next slide, please. The Greenland System Policy Review will be updating the natural heritage system planning policies in the regional official plan so that the policy framework is consistent and conforms with provincial policy and plans. The policy review integrates and builds on the natural heritage system planning work of the local municipalities and conservation authorities. The review includes updated mapping in the regional official plan where needed to ensure core areas of the Greenland system reflects best available data and to meet provincial policy conformity consistency requirements. The intent is to achieve a Greenland system that reflects natural heritage system planning based on current practices in conservation ecology. Next slide, please. This slide highlights some of the background policy documents and studies informing the policy review. We have worked closely with local municipal staff and conservation authorities to ensure we are using and referencing existing studies, avoiding duplication, and ensuring that our work is consistent and supports local initiatives. The region's investment in Conservation Authority natural heritage system studies has provided needed science to inform our work. This would be inclusive of works such as the TRCA Terrestrial Natural Heritage System, CVC's Credit River Watershed Natural Heritage System, Strategy and System, and the Conservation Authority Natural Heritage System in the town of Caledon and region of Peel. Similarly, we have utilized and incorporated local municipal natural heritage system strategies which are science-based and leading examples. In that case, we are talking about work such as the Mississauga Natural Heritage and Urban Forest Strategy, the City of Brampton Natural Heritage and Environmental Management Strategy, and the Town of Caledon Greenbelt Natural Heritage System Key Natural Heritage Features and Key Hydrological Features Mapping Studies. Next slide, please. This slide highlights some of the changes that we have made with respect to provisions in the Provincial Policy Statement and the Growth Plan NHS. With respect to the PPS, a key change in the 2020 Provincial Policy Statement is that municipalities are now required to identify natural heritage systems in their official plans. The draft policies ensure that there is conformity with the requirements of the PPS, including those listed on the slide. We have been consulting on draft policies through informal stakeholder and public consultation. The Growth Plan Natural Heritage System is reflected in the sense that a region's plans will also need to be updated to conform to the new 2019 Growth Plan policies. The Growth Plan Natural Heritage System policies have added to the regional plan. The Growth Plan Natural Heritage System designation is an overlay that only affects 3 small areas in Peel. Within the Growth Plan Natural Heritage System, the full range of existing and new agriculture-related uses, on-farm diversified and normal farm practices are permitted. Next slide, please. The proposed policy framework builds on the natural heritage system approaches in the provincial policies and plans, including the approaches contained in the Provincial Policy Statement, the Growth Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan, Niagara Escarpment Plan, and Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. 2 sections in the draft regional official plan provide policy direction for the Greenland system and water resources system, recognizing the 2 systems overlap and are not mutually exclusive. The draft policies retain the existing core areas, which represents provincially and regionally significant features and areas, including core woodlands, core valley lands, and provincially significant wetlands, provincially significant life areas of natural and scientific interest, escarpment natural areas, and environmentally significant areas. The natural areas and corridors, which are other significant natural features and areas, including non-provincially significant wetlands, woodlands that are not defined as regionally significant but which meet specified criteria, such as size, significant wildlife habitat, fish habitat, habitat of endangered and threatened species, and the potential natural areas and corridors are other natural features and areas that are subject to further review and assessment to confirm their functional role in supporting and enhancing the ecological integrity of the Greenland system. These potential natural areas and corridors include unevaluated wetlands, cultural woodlands, sensitive groundwater recharge areas, enhancement areas, buffers, and linkages. Next slide, please. The draft policies provide a transition from a features-based to a more system-based approach. A policy section and new definitions are added to define terms and provide direction to the local municipalities to identify, protect, restore, and enhance the Greenland system in local official plans and through the planning approval process. The draft policies provide requirements for the establishment of linkages and enhancement areas as a condition of development or site alteration, through public restoration programs and through the voluntary stewardship efforts of landowners. The policy direction is regional in scope and provides for the implementation of policies by the local municipalities in local official plans. Next slide, please. The map that you're looking at, and which is temporarily referred to as Schedule Y1, updates and replaces Schedule A, which is a map of the core areas of the Greenland system in Peel. Core areas, as was previously mentioned, represent provincially and regionally significant features and areas, and are a subset of a total system of features and areas that are mapped at the local level. There's a high standard of protection afforded to core areas of the Greenland system, and for that reason, these are mapped on a schedule in the regional official plan. Next slide, please. The two maps depicted on this slide reflect proposed updated changes to core wetland mapping and core escarpment natural area, both components of the core areas of the Greenland system in Peel. We are updating mapping based on best available mapping data. The core areas of the Greenland system mapping was extensively reviewed in the previous official plan review. We have revived and reviewed mapping layers which make up the core areas and have identified where map updates were required to the core wetlands and escarpment natural areas mapping, and are using provincial data, including provincially significant wetland mapping, undertaken by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to update the map schedule in the regional official plan. Mapping changes are highlighted here on this slide and have been posted to our website for public review and comment, along with a detailed web map of the changes. Next slide, please. This map, temporarily referred to as Schedule X11, formerly Schedule D3 in the regional official plan, is updated to reflect the Greenbelt Plan's Urban River Valley designation and the Growth Plan Natural Heritage System overlay, which applies to 3 small areas in Caledon. Next slide, please. This map, temporarily referred to as Figure Y1, depicts the Provincial Plan Natural Heritage System overlays and designations applicable to Peel. Figure Y1 and the following 2 figures are not formal schedules in regional official plan and are provided for information purposes only. What we propose to do in our official plan update is to organize the current natural heritage planning layers that apply in Peel so that the planning requirements can be easily understood and interpreted without adding additional layers. There's very good policy protection in Peel for the regional Greenland system. We have mapped the overall system in accordance with provincial direction, placing mapping and regional planning schedules and figures. Regional core areas of the Greenland system, which are provincially and regionally significant, are mapped in the regional plan, along with provincial plan natural heritage system designation. Mapping in figures are additional guidance for the local planning purposes. Next slide, please. The map, temporarily referred to as Figure Y2, depicts the natural heritage features and areas that are included as elements of the Greenland system core, natural areas and corridors, and potential natural areas and corridor framework. This figure is not a formal schedule in regional official plan and is provided for information purposes. We have not recommended mapping the natural areas and corridors and potential natural areas and corridors in the regional plan, as the approaches are different in each of the local municipalities. A regional plan provides a flexibility and support for implementation at the local. Next slide, please. This figure, temporarily identified as Y3, is a conceptual depiction of a regional natural heritage system based on Conservation Authority studies that is intended to be further interpreted and identified by the local municipalities through their implementation of Greenland System Policy Framework in accordance with provincial policy. The Conservation Authority Natural Heritage System identifies lands in existing natural cover and lands with the potential to be restored or enhanced and provides a science-based foundation for the implementation of natural heritage system planning and peel by the local municipalities. As was previously mentioned, the figures temporarily identified as Y1, Y2, and Y3 depicting the Greenland system and peel do not form part of the regional official plan, but are provided as a reference to conceptually illustrate the system's component. Next slide, please. Madam Chair, this concludes my presentation to the committee, and I want to thank the committee for giving us this opportunity, and I will turn it over to the chair to see if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I have one question from Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, I would just express concern. It'll have to be discussed at some other point, but historically in Caledon, we get these digital mappings of natural heritage features, and they're all coming from the same source, Ministry of Natural Resources, and they all have the same errors. So really at the end of the day, you have to take a map out, walk into a farmer's field and say, is it true that this is here? And in many cases, it's not. Wetlands, woodlands, streams are misrepresented. So I think we have to get into how these are implemented. So you've got a schedule there, but what does it mean and how, what is the policy language? So at some point we have to discuss that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Leary, do you have any comment, or that was just a flag?
I took it as a flag for potential future follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson, you'll move receipt of the delegation. And Councillor Starr, can you move the 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 communications items? Thank you. And Councillor Kiernan, would you like to move adjournment? Always the best one to have your hand up for. Thank you, and I'd like to thank the staff. That's a lot of work. I have a sneaking suspicion I'm going to lose some of my Mississauga and Brampton councillors if we don't soon move into the intensification part of the MCR. So I'm hoping we get to do this in the near future before it turns into a full Caledon planning meeting. But it's been very interesting. I'm particularly interested in all the stuff to do with clean water. That was quite revealing, and just reinforces my vote last Thursday, Alan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the staff, and we'll see you all soon.
For councillors who are participating in the next meeting, please sign out of this meeting and then sign back in with the separate meeting invite that was provided to you for the Policies and Procedures Committee workshop. Thank you.